In the earlier steps, we made use of add component and add bean. What is the difference between them and when to use which ones? Let's talk about that in this specific step. Let's get started with where you can use add component and add bean. Add component can be used on any Java class. Earlier, we created a Mario game and we put add component on top of it. We created game runner class and we put add component on top of it as well. On the other hand, add bean is put on a specific method, typically used on methods in Spring configuration classes. So in this Spring configuration class, we are putting in add bean to create a bean in here. Now, which of these is easier to use? Add component is very easy to use. You just need to add an annotation, right? So all that I need to do is to add an annotation in here, Mario game runner. However, add bean is a little bit more complex. You need to write all the code to do the creation of the bean. You need to write all the code to auto-wire the dependencies as well. Now, how does auto-wiring happen? When you're using add component, you can use any of these approaches to do auto-wiring. You can either use constructor injection or setter injection or field injection. You can either use constructor injection to do the auto-wiring, or you can use setter injection to do the auto-wiring. And we also played with field injection, right? You can put auto-wired in here and it would be field injection. You can use any of these auto-wiring approaches with add component. Now, what do you do with add bean? In add bean, you can do auto-wiring by calling a specific method. So over here, name is a method call, age is a method call, address is a method call as well. So you can either use method calls to do the auto-wiring in, or you can make use of parameters. So you can add a parameter, so string name, int age, address 3, and these would be auto-wired in by Spring Framework. So with both add component and add bean, you can do auto-wiring, but they use different approaches. Next, who creates the beans? In the case of add component, Spring Framework would do a component scan. It would identify all the component classes which are present. It would identify the dependencies of them, and it would ensure that a bean is created and auto-wiring of the dependencies is done. However, in the case of add bean, you are writing the bean creation code. So you write the code to create the bean in here. So now the critical question, what is it recommended for? Typically, most of the times, add component is recommended. If you are creating an application and inside that you are writing the code for your component classes and you are creating beans for your own component classes, in that kind of scenario, add component is the recommended approach. You can go into your source code, put add component on it, and Spring makes it very easy to create your beans and manage the dependencies for them. However, you can go for add bean if you have a lot of custom business logic that you'd want to do before you'd create a bean. For example, before creating a person bean, I would want to check a lot of things, write business logic around them, and then create a person bean. In that kind of scenario, it might make sense to use add bean. The other scenario where add bean is frequently used is to instantiate beans for third-party libraries. You might be making use of Spring Security. You don't have any access to Spring Security code. So you cannot go into Spring Security code and add add component in there. If you want to create beans for Spring Security, in that kind of scenario, the best approach would be to use add bean. So use add bean, write a method creating your beans in here. So you can set up the Spring Security beans in here, and that would help you to configure Spring Security as per your needs. So the most important takeaway from this step is typically add component is recommended for your own applications. If you're writing components for your application and you are creating beans for them, the easiest approach is add component. However, there are scenarios where add bean might be recommended. For example, if you have a lot of business logic you need to do before you create a bean, or if you are instantiating beans for third-party libraries, for example, like Spring Security. In those kind of situations, you can go with add bean.